It's not out of the norm for head coaches to call offensive plays, but lack of an offensive coordinator is unusual, as 30 teams have them or are expected to have them on staff in 2017, with the Browns as the only team that is going without the title. The 49ers will formally introduce Shanahan as their head coach today. Now, keep in mind, Shanahan coming off a heartbreaking Super Bowl loss to the Patriots, where the Falcons' offense stalled in the second half. Stephen A., should the Niners be worried about Shanahan?
Well, I think they should be worried about Shanahan because I think that he's never been a head coach before. If you're an individual that doesn't feel the need to have a coordinator, then I want you to have the requisite experience on your resume to justify your willingness to do multiple jobs, because you would have a clue as to what it takes to be a head coach because you've been a head coach before, and as a result, you can make that decision. I didn't like it when Hugh Jackson did it, but at the same time, I could respect it because he was a coach in Oakland for a season, and he was an offensive coordinator in Cincinnati thereafter. It makes sense. This is Kyle Shanahan's first head coaching job. The GM and John Lynch that he basically ensured would have the job ended up getting a 6-year deal, and he has no experience whatsoever. He's never been in the front office of any NFL team. He was a player, and now he's a broadcaster, and a really good broadcaster, but he's never had any executive experience, and yet he's getting a 6-year deal. So you've got a rookie as an executive. You're a rookie as a coach. And on top of that, you're going to add offensive coordinator duties to your resume. That makes no sense whatsoever to me. I don't think it's a wise move by Kyle Shanahan. I think it's ego-driven more than anything else, or worse, a fear to allocate responsibility to others when that's your job as a head coach. And I think it's something that the 49ers should be concerned about, considering how inept their franchise has been since Jim Harbaugh departed.
You know, it's not always that perception is reality, but perception can influence reality. Take Kyle Shanahan, for example, in this situation. Shanahan is like this offensive genius, right? And that's why the Niners want him. Look who turned down the Niners job, or who wasn't interested in it. Josh McDaniels, who's thinking, before I take a head coach, to make sure it's the right one, right? So Shanahan winds up taking the job, and he's this offensive genius, except that in the moment of truth in the Super Bowl, he kind of outsmarts himself. And you lose the Super Bowl as a result. And on his way in the door, he doesn't need an offensive coordinator. And that's unorthodox. And so what that sets up is people pointing the finger to those things if and when he doesn't meet with success. And given what the 49ers need on that team, which is, let's see, everything, it's unlikely you're going to have success right away. It's interesting from the 49ers' point of view that they hired Chip Kelly. Also, they wanted to be innovative on offense. That doesn't work. They hire another guy who's considered, if not innovative, at least extremely talented as an offensive coordinator to be the head coach. And now he's doing unorthodox things that critics will be able to point to, who kind of forget the details and just say, oh, look at that. 49ers not good. There goes Kyle Shanahan, the guy who blew it in the Super Bowl, the guy who didn't want an offensive coordinator, you know, and he will be branded that way, even though the fact is the 49ers have a long way to go to be a competitive team. So in that way, perception will affect reality. But I wouldn't worry about Shanahan's ability as a coach, but I would worry about reaction to these moves down the line.
I would worry about his moves as a coach because, again, when you're taking on that much responsibility, he doesn't even know if he's going to be a good head coach yet. And as good as he was as an offensive coordinator this year, on the biggest stage, a choke job ensued. And there's no other way to slice it when it comes to him. Matt Ryan made a mistake by taking a sack. There's no doubt about that. But when you consider the fact that the offensive coordinator is responsible for calling plays and decided to call pass plays instead of 2 running plays, we had the New England Patriots here in the building yesterday. They're still scratching their heads as to why the Atlanta Falcons didn't continue to run the football after that spectacular catch by Julio Jones down the right sideline. So when you look at it from that perspective, the players may have made a mistake, but the choke job with Shanahan, because Kyle Shanahan should have known better than to try to throw the football in that situation where all you needed to do was to run 2 running plays, and ultimately you wasn't going to lose the 12 yards you lost on the sack to Matt Ryan. You had Mark Bryant that hit 24 24 of his last 25 field goals in between 35 and 45 yards. And this just was no excuse to make that kind of call. So when you look at it from that perspective, you're Kyle Shanahan. You got a few things to learn from. You're clearly an exceptional offensive coordinator. I'm happy that he has the opportunity to be a head coach, but you are a novice as a head coach, and you don't have a chip as an offensive coordinator, primarily because you didn't call the right plays down the stretch. Those are the kind of things that you have to look at when you try to take on a multitude of extra responsibilities, and you have yet to prove that you're worthy of the responsibility you have right now.
Also tough for Shanahan to argue, look, what that experience in the Super Bowl just taught me is the buck's going to stop with you as the head coach anyway. You can't leave it up to your offensive coordinator because he might make a mistake. You might as well be your own offensive coordinator in those situations, or maybe in every situation. The problem is the guy who made the mistake was Kyle Shanahan. It was him. And now he's both the head coach and the offensive coordinator. That said, it was a mistake that cost them the Super Bowl in a game they were winning because the correct play call would have salted the win. It would have salted away the win. But so then you have to also look at the fact that with him as offensive coordinator, one of the greatest offenses we've ever seen was unleashed on the league and resulted in a lead late in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. So he's obviously talented, obviously offensively gifted, and maybe also gifted as a head coach. But I don't think that's going to show up in wins and losses in the first year. And if it doesn't, people will point to stuff like this and say, see, he's trying to be too cute, too smart for his own good.
Well, that great offensive coordinator still lost 5 games with that high-powered offense during this regular season. That's number one. And number two, as a head coach, you have the license to intervene at your discretion and say, no, we're not doing this, we're doing that, which is what people are saying Quinn should have done with Shanahan in the Super Bowl this past Sunday. So really it makes no sense not to hire an offensive coordinator, because even though you're delegating responsibilities to him, at the same time as a head coach, at your volition, you can intervene and say, this is what I want done. See, so you have somebody handling the brunt of the bulk of the responsibility, but you still have the power to intervene. The fact that you can't see that and would still be willing to take on that responsibility yourself is something that I think that the 49ers as an organization should be keenly aware of. I'm not sure it's the wisest move.
One thing about the 49ers they've shown is they're not afraid of innovation. They're not afraid to take risks that way, and this is one of them.
No question. So if it stands this way, they're going to have a new GM, a new head coach, no offensive coordinator, and if Todd McShay's latest mock draft is right, they're going to have a new quarterback in Deshaun Watson. It's going to be interesting out west. Coming up, unless you live under a rock, you probably have seen Charles Oakley losing it at the Knicks game last night, but how much are the Knicks to blame for this? You don't want to miss that discussion. Also, the Cavs' big three will probably have the night off in Oklahoma City tonight. Don't miss Stephen A's theory of why LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love will be riding the bench tonight. There's more.
On the Hook is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops. Your adventure starts here.
East Coast, I want you to know we braved the elements just for you. Right, gentlemen? Stephen A. and Max in NYC. My guys, how we feeling, fellas?
What's going on? Good morning. How y'all doing?
And it is a blizzard out there. You ain't lying, Molly.
You're not in L.A. anymore, Max. Let's get into it, gentlemen. A lot to get into, as Stephen A. told you. So there's 3 sides to every story, right? Her side, his side, and the truth. That's the case for the New York Knickerbockers, where the drama continued last night. Former Knick Charles Oakley was involved in a physical altercation at the team's home game against the Clippers. Madison Square Garden security escorted Oakley out of the stands, and the Knicks said Oakley was arrested by NYPD. He was seen shoving MSG security near team owner James Dolan. Oakley was released from jail early Thursday morning.
What happened, me and 4 friends went to the game tonight to watch the Knicks and the Clippers. Get there, sit down, try to have a good time. Next thing I know, I was asked to leave the building. I asked why. And he said, guys, well, you have to leave because someone ordered you to leave. And I'm like, I've been here 4.5 minutes. I'm a Knicks fan, played here for 10 years. I love the Knicks. I love New York. I don't know why I'm not welcome into the Garden. Phil came in the back. Spike Lee was in the back. Phil, like, what happened? I said, Phil, I just got here 4.5 minutes ago. What could I do in 4.5 minutes? But things happen. I'm a grown man. I can fight my battle. I'm a guy who tell the truth. I don't have to lie about nothing. You know, I'm an honest guy.
Here we go. The New York Post sports page never disappoints. Nicked off. Stephen A., you were there at the Garden. What is your reaction to this Oakley incident?
Well, it's incredibly unfortunate for all parties concerned. And, you know, even though Oakley has his reasons, the reality is he doesn't look good in this equation. You know, you're 6'9", you're 250 pounds easy. I mean, he's built like just a chiseled brick house. This is a hardcore dude. And, you know, you have a reputation as being an enforcer on the NBA court, but also off of it. And you're seen pushing individuals who happen to be security, guarding personnel, law enforcement officials, or what have you. Thank God it didn't end up being worse than it actually could have been. So in that regard, Oakley does not look good. In the case of the New York Knicks, here was their side of things. Their attitude was like Charles Oakley was conducting himself in a belligerent fashion, so he ultimately had to be forcibly removed and was ultimately arrested. Because he was spewing some stuff in the direction of Chairman James Dolan and others, and it just could not be tolerated. I spoke to Charles Oakley, Max, 1:30 this morning, and at that time he said to me, I'm guilty of all of that, but it was after they approached me to remove me from the game and ultimately forcibly removed me. He said that was when I was losing it. Before that, I had not said a word. I had arrived at the arena. I was in the seat area for approximately 4 to 4.5 minutes. I never said a word to Mr. Dolan. I never said a word to anybody. I saw Mr. Dolan turn around, see me there, and then a minute later, all I see are a bunch of security and MSG personnel and others come over to me to tell me that I needed to leave the game. I got a ticket. I'm a fan like anybody else. I should be allowed to be at the game to watch the Knicks play, especially if I had a ticket and a seat. And he said, and I don't think it was right that I was removed. So that was his version. It differs from the New York Knicks because the New York Knicks say that he was removed after he was conducting himself in a certain fashion. He's saying that he only lost it when they approached him for no reason and told him that he had to leave the game. Those are two different versions. What it comes down to is who do you believe? And it's hard, and I think it's sort of, you know, I don't want to say it's irresponsible because everybody has their opinion. I've known Oakley for 20 years. The man's not a liar. He's always straight up. I mean, he's straight up, and everybody knows he's straight up because he's absolutely, positively fearless when it comes to expressing himself in any way he so chooses. He's not worried about how anybody else feels. The flip side to it is that the New York Knicks and Ian Begley are saying that they had people who were witnesses who did hear him going off on James Dolan before security personnel arrived. Phil Jackson ultimately got out of the seat, went into the tunnel, tried to calm him down, at which time he was going ballistic about James Dolan, so much so that my sources told me Phil Jackson reached out to Michael Jordan and asked Michael Jordan to try and calm him down. But by that time, the police had enough and had placed him under arrest and removed him from Madison Square Garden. That's the story.
Well, yeah, if you show up with a fighting spirit to Madison Square Garden, they immediately eject you and arrest you. I mean, that's the code of competition for the New York Knicks. I don't think Oakley looks bad here, and normally I'd flip on a player who did that or a person who did that. You don't comport yourself that way as an adult. You don't put your hands on other adults. But let's look at what just happened, really. Molly said his side, her side, and the truth. Let's look at his side first. That'd be Charles Oakley. His side is that he didn't say anything to Dolan before security approached him. You just said you've known Charles Oakley for a long time, known him to be an honest guy. That's his reputation. Any Knicks fan or basketball fan who remembers Charles Oakley, that dude put in an honest day's work every single day. I remember him talking about being a basketball player is no different than being a farmer. The sun, you get up before the sun comes up, you work all day and you go to sleep. I mean, that was Charles Oakley. So Charles Oakley is credible. This is not a guy who looks for shortcuts or the easy way out or makes up stories. He doesn't feel he has to, because when you work like that and leave it all on the line, you have no reason to make up stories. And so I find Charles Oakley credible. So if he's not cursing out Dolan beforehand, let's say fans and others have said he was being boisterous. I don't know. It's a Knicks game, not a ballet. So, okay, he feels he's comporting himself within the norms of Madison Square Garden behavior. I tend to believe that. If security comes and starts to, this is the attitude actually the Knicks need, and this is very much a New York attitude. If you're comporting yourself within social norms and some other people put their hands on you against your will, guess what's going to happen? Get your hands off of me. And so Charles Oakley's not the type of person where you can just put your hands on him for no reason with impunity. It's not going to happen. That's actually some of the fighting spirit this Knicks team needs. That's if it's Oakley's point of view. That's his side. What about her side? James Dolan and the New York Knicks. They said that he was cursing Dolan out. That's not okay. If you're loudly and repeatedly using bad language in family entertainment setting, that's not okay. There could be kids there. It's a later game, but still, that's adults too. They don't want to hear that. But what if he's saying something like Dolan sucks or Dolan stinks, to clean it up a little bit? Well, that's true. I mean, any Knicks fan would tell you that's true. And if you're the owner of the New York Knicks and you show up publicly to a game and you have the miserable track record that James Dolan does, don't forget, this is the James Dolan who, when the Rockettes didn't want to perform for that Trump event, James Dolan said, well, some Rockette brought up, are you saying we should be tolerant of intolerance? And James Dolan said, yes, I guess that's what I am saying. Well, guess what, James Dolan? You should be tolerant of intolerance toward you because you're a miserable owner and most Knicks fans hate you. And that includes Charles Oakley. So when you say Oakley looks bad here, if he was in fact cursing Dolan out in front of everybody repeatedly, loudly,